You know, it's just kind of a tale of two halves, really.
A tale of two halves. I don't know if we could have put it any better than that. Welcome into Teal The Show. We've got Frangie here. Frank, I think we're going to try and spend the next few minutes trying to make sense of this thing, because it was definitely a tale of two halves. If you watched the first half, went to sleep, you probably woke up today thinking it would be Victory Monday, only to find out.
If you watched really most of the three quarters,
yeah.
I thought the Jags dominated. It was one of those crazy games, Jamal, where one team's dominating on the road. I'm telling you, if Travis Etienne doesn't fumble, the crowd was out of it. If he scores on that play, or he puts the ball away and they score on the next play, you could feel it. Being in the stadium, you could feel those Dolphins fans starting to leave. They were booing. They had nothing to keep them excited about. The Dolphins bench was deflated a little bit. And then all of a sudden, in 2 plays, everything changed. The stadium got energy because they had nothing to cheer about until then.
Right.
And then everything flipped on 2 plays. We see it in sports all the time.
Right.
And it's when you've had all the momentum and you lose it on the road, it's hard as heck to re-grab it, and they weren't able to do it.
Momentum is real in sports, and that is a perfect show and tell of what happens when you lose momentum and the other team kind of gains it. One of the things that I kind of took away from this, and I think we need to apply this to the full season. You got to play the full tilt. You got to play the full 4 quarters finish. And I think we were talking just before we started the show here, Frank, and you said it's just one game. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
They didn't finish the game. 3 quarters, you just said they won. They didn't finish. You got to finish the season. If you let one game get out of control, then all of a sudden now it's defined your season. But if they get back on track this week, what thinks about it?
Now listen, fans invest, man. You invest your emotion in this thing. You can't wait for the game to start. So when you lose one that you thought you had won, yeah, it's a gut punch, man. It's a gut punch to the team, to the players, to the coaches, to the fans. That's real. It doesn't mean that's not real. You only get 17 cracks at it. But you do have to keep it in perspective. You can look at it 2 ways. One, how in the world did they lose a game that they dominated, that they're up by 10 points in the second half, they're up by 14 points at one point? That's a gut punch. If you get beyond that, you say, wait a minute, you just played a team that won 11 games last year, that has Super Bowl aspirations of their own, and it took a 52-yard field goal to beat you. Think about this. The Jaguars never trailed that game with any time on the clock. The only time they trailed, are when zeros were on the clock at the end of the game. So again, that doesn't make it feel any better. They played well on spots. They did not do what they had to do in the 4th quarter. That's why they lost the game.
All right, you started getting to maybe the silver lining there, Frank, because there were some bright spots for this team. Let's go through some of those bright spots. Let's start with the Jaguars defense. If I told you going into the game, the Jaguars defense held the Dolphins to 20 points, I'd be willing to bet you told me the Jags won.
That's right. And I thought the defense, they played a lot of players. I think that's one thing. We knew they were going to because it was hot. Man, they all played. They played a lot of guys. I thought Ryan Nielsen's defense was very good. Guys had Jarian Jones having to cover Tyreek Hill right out of the gate, and he did a great job. That defense is going to be pretty good. The offense has to help them a little bit. The offense has to keep the ball for a while. After the drive where Travis fumbled, they had 1 first down the rest of the game. They didn't complete a pass after that. So the offense has to help the defense some, but I agree with you. I thought the defense played very well. The debut showing under Ryan Nielsen was a success, no question.
Now, on the other side of the ball, we saw some good things from rookie Brian Thomas Jr., second-year guy Tank Bigsby. I think Tank maybe we've seen it during training camp in the preseason. The coaching staff's raved about him, but I know fans just really needed to see it out there on the football field from Tank. It was a little bit of a coming-out party for him.
No question. He played probably his best game as a Jaguar, one of the best games we've seen him play. But we saw that coming. We talked about it on Teal The Show. We talked about it on our radio show. You knew there was something special coming from Tank Bigsby. He had a great offseason. They have 2 good running backs. I hate it for Travis Etienne the way it ended for him, but they have 2 good running backs. Listen, they've got a pretty good team. Now they've got to learn to finish. Learning to finish is a big part of this thing, and they'll talk about that. You'll hear Doug talk about it this week. You'll hear the players talk about it this week. You have to finish the job, but it's clear this isn't a team that went down to Miami and got beat 41-7. This is a good football team that has to finish the job.
All right, you hate that for Travis Etienne, but he'll get another crack at it this coming week against the Cleveland Browns. That's the first home game of the year. Coming up next in Teal The Show, we'll hear from some of the guys in the locker room as they get ready to try and flush this one and move on to what's next. That's straight ahead right after this quick break. All right, this one is a tough loss. Just the way it went down, I think it's something that's going to stick with fans for a little while. It's definitely going to stick with the guys on the team for a little while. But overall, one way or another, it is a game that they have to find a way to move on from.
It's tough that we lost, definitely. It's hard. Don't like losing, obviously. That's week 1. We showed, a lot of great things yesterday. I think that's probably the most frustrating thing is, we're close. And so we wish we Got that one yesterday, but we're going to move on for sure. It's not hard to flush it all. We're on to the next one.
I know it's week one, 16 weeks. I mean, again, if you put on the tape, defense, offense, special teams, everyone just flying around the ball, trying to make plays, hustling. It was also, I mean, it was really good to see the tape, to see that, you know, we're that close.
You know, want to have a better outcome as a team, and individuals just do what we're supposed to do and go out and win. You know, that's the main focus of everything. So, you know, this week coming up, we got Cleveland. Flush this week, and let's get to next week.
So obviously, it's the first game of the season. With the team as a whole, we obviously know we have to correct so those little small little details to what we feel like we know what we did wrong to defeat ourselves.
Look, losses happen in the NFL. Every game's close. There are very few blowouts in this league. They all come down to one score here or there, and this is just one of those where it didn't go the Jaguars' way, even though it looked like it would at first.
Yeah, it's a long season. Look, remember last year they started 1-2, and one of those losses they got gutted at home by Houston and a rookie quarterback, and we thought, oh my goodness, the world's coming to an end. Then they win 7 of their next 8 games. They get to 8-3 and think, well, they're going to the Super Bowl, and then they lose 5 of the last 6. There's ebbs and flows in an NFL season. But you still have to learn how to finish the game. I think what happened, what bothers them so much is even after the adversity came, they didn't handle it very well. You're going to have moments in a game where you have the momentum and then you lose it. Can you regain the momentum? And they weren't able to do that. I think that's probably the most bothersome thing, and I think that's what they will tell you.
All right, Frank, we've already talked about the positives from the game. Maybe let's talk about the negatives, because it is a long season and some of those negatives might show up again. Biggest concerns coming out of Sunday?
They've got to be able to make short yardage situations. That's the only thing I connect to last year. People want to connect it to last year. Well, they lost 5 of 6, then they lost again. Well, it's a new year. It's a new team. There's new personnel. But the one area that I will connect, you've got to be able to make 3rd in a yard, 4th in a yard. A lot of people made a big deal about Doug going for it from his own 32 on 4th down. Well, it turned out he shouldn't have gone for it because he didn't make it. It turned out it didn't work. Now they got a reprieve when Miami missed a field goal. But the point is, in today's football, you do go for it in your own territory some. I didn't mind it as much as other people did. What I minded was they can't make a yard. There's twice now you've got to make a yard, and they've got to solve that. Whether it's the quarterback sneak that Tom Brady made every time he ever tried it, whether it's that little dive with the fullback that Miami worked, it worked twice for Miami, didn't work for Jacksonville. You've got to be able to make a yard. That hurt them last year. It kept them out of the playoffs last year, and it helped cause them a loss this game. If there's one thing you've got to get fixed, the line's got to play better. You've got to be able to make a yard. That they have got to correct.
It's tough to get a yard when your guard's 2 yards back on his back on that play. Is that something they can fix midway through the season, or is that a personnel issue that they have to fix in the offseason?
Well, that's the question. And you got to fix it now. You've only played 1 game. You got 16 games left, so it's not something you can wait till the offseason. But they've got to figure that out. Is it a personnel issue? Are the offensive line just not blocking well enough? I don't think it's a play calling issue, and frankly, I don't think it's a running backs issue. Can you run quarterback sneaks? Can you have somehow, some way, you've got to fix that. Listen, if it's a personnel issue, you're in trouble. Your team is built. Can you replace one of your offensive linemen with one of your young linemen? Maybe, but I think it's too early to panic on who you have out there. You have to find a way, though. That, to me, is the biggest connector from last year to this year, is you got to be able to make 3rd and short. I think that's a big part of it, I think. And by the way, I think the line struggled in pass protection. They didn't complete a pass after the fumble. They had one pass that Christian Kirk should have caught on a 3rd and 5. The ball was in his hands. He didn't catch it. But they also had 2 sacks. Again, I thought Miami gained some energy after that sequence. I thought Jacksonville lost some energy, and it affected the offensive line.
No reason to be concerned about Christian Kirk, though. There were a couple of drops, but he's Mr. Reliable.
Christian's just fine. I agree with you. Christian would tell you, hey, he wasn't in his game, didn't play very well. Christian Kirk's going to catch the football, and I think Trevor's going to throw it. I mean, look, Trevor, that throw to Brian Thomas in the back of the end zone, the touchdown, was a thing of beauty. There were 2 guys there. He had to weave it between people. I've said it all along. The skill is going to be fine on this football team. Can you block well enough? And that's going to be the question.
All right. We're talking more about the Cleveland Browns on Friday's show, but let's take a brief look at them. The Browns did lose pretty handily to the Cowboys on Sunday, so this looks like a perfect kind of get-right game for the Jaguars if you kind of put it on paper.
Yeah, if you look at this, if you used to break it up into quadrants when there were 16 games. Now there's 17 games, so the math doesn't work quite as well. But the bottom line is, in the early part of the season, you knew it was going to be tough. At Miami, it was going to be tough. At Buffalo, it's going to be tough. At Houston, it's going to be tough. So Cleveland's at home. You need to win this one for that reason. Now, again, the season's not over if you don't, but the bottom line is if you break the season up, this is a very important game for them. Nobody would debate the significance and the importance of this game. I think, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, Jamal, but I think you got to get to London at least 2-3 or 3-2. I think that's what you have to do. You can't go to London 1-4 or 0-5. Well, if that's the case, boy, this is an important game against the Cleveland Browns.
Well, we'll see what happens. Look, overall, I think it is a tough loss. And it's the way they lost that I think isn't sitting well with people. But if you just take part of it, the showing overall should make you feel pretty good about where the Jaguars are. They didn't get blown out. They hung in there. You mentioned it. They didn't trail until there were zeros on the clock. And there's no moral victories in football, but you know what? There's something there.
Yeah, there's no question of the fact they've got a pretty good team. Now, the first thing is, do you have a pretty good team? Are you in the top half of teams in the NFL? Well, they've got it. We now know that. They're one of the better 16 teams, not one of the worst 16 teams. But until you can make those big plays, the NFL is about big plays and big moments, and until you make more big plays than the other guy, you don't elevate yourself from top 16 to top 8 or 9, and that's the next step they've got to take.
It sure would be nice to see some of those big plays and big moments this Sunday at home at the bank against the Cleveland Browns. We'll talk more about that on Friday night's episode of Teal the Show. Hey, Frank, thanks for being here tonight. Thanks you at home for tuning in. Good night, everybody, and go Jags.